Sean B.W. Parker has written 7 books and recorded 6 music albums.
Hello there, Sean B.W. Parker here, and this week Eleanor Williams of Barrow in Furness was sentenced to 8.5 years for 9 counts of perverting the course of justice for allegations of rape she made in that town and grooming gangs, etc. And online there's been lots of talk about put her away forever, it's not long enough, etc. But all she did was to exploit a system that was set in place by Keir Starmer, crossing over from America, and which has put the Believe the Victims policy, which has put hundreds, if not thousands, of men in the US and in the UK in prison over the last 10 years.
In 2018, Sean was convicted of a Category 2 sexual offence, characterised in court as friend rape, at the height of the Me Too movement in the UK. He was sentenced to a prison term of 8.5 years and, in line with convention, released after 4.5 years. He spent the first 2.5 years at Dartmoor, the UK's oldest and most remote prison, where he worked as a founding editor of the prison magazine and as a Samaritan's listener. He's now the editor of False Allegations Watch, a division of Michael Norton's Empowering the Innocent project, and continues to write on art, culture, and justice reform.
So 5 a.m, we went up to my bedroom at the venue to the top floor, and had consensual sex as far as I was concerned. And she stayed the night, and the next morning, we were both feeling, have we pushed a friendship too far? Which is what often happens. What has happened a million times a night across the country of a weekend in Britain. A complainant had told her boyfriend that afternoon about what had happened, and I think her parents at the same time. They'd decided, well, that's rape then, you were drunk. And the police came around that evening at 6 p.m.
Just going back to your housemate, because your housemate, I'm not quite sure how to put this, told you that he'd heard the two of you in your room, and it was clearly consensual. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that roughly right?
The housemate below me just said, after the assault the next day, he said, "Oh, I just heard some giggling and moaning last night." But nobody else in the house heard anything, because we were trying to be quiet. We were drunk. It was very late, and it was time to go to bed. We were being quiet.
I think in the real world, as opposed to the the world as imagined by feminist lawyers, for example, a man would take a woman giggling as an indication of consent.
It was a legal aid situation. I'm not going to be too unkind, but at one point, when the housemate said he wasn't, we had to drag him to court to talk about the laughing and giggling thing, but he became a hostile witness in the 14 months whilst I'm out of town. So when that happened, that's the one witness gone. So why he changed his mind, no one knows. People think that could be from being pressured, from being any kind of reason. But he changed his mind. And as soon as he did, the barrister turned to me and said, "Perhaps you shouldn't talk, Mr. Parker. Your stammer could be seen as a sign of guilt." And I didn't want to speak because of my stammer, because of the whole stress of the whole thing. Who wants to speak in court? I said, "Right, okay, you know something I don't. I'm not going to speak." Fantastic. He said, "Well, just sign this." So I signed it to say I understand the possibilities, because I didn't want to speak. But as we've seen subsequently, it was a fatal decision. Not that everything would have been okay if I had spoken. I recognise that. But because I didn't, I really signed my own warrant.
But whose love will you miss?
No means no. But to young people, trying to get no out in a situation that's understood as, let's stop this situation, they need a bit more ability to communicate that I'm not comfortable with this. These are my boundaries. This is what I don't want to continue with. And they don't have that conversation. A lot of people just meet up for sex. And
most of my my experience was of being falsely accused, and the horrific wake up that gave to the world in which we're now discussing. And I think, you know, the main reason that you wanted to talk to me is because I made the film We Believe You, which was interviews with people that I'd met online mainly, in various support groups for people who were falsely accused. And gradually I realized that it wasn't a matter of tens or 20s or 50s or even hundreds, but thousands of people who were falsely accused of sex crimes. And the very nature of that was life destroying and witch hunt prompting, and all those horrific things which I'd experienced had happened to so many others. So I decided I had to make a film, which was one of my background really, was to do a film that would show people just how common it was, what the experience felt like, and why perhaps we needed to raise awareness of this going on.
Is it the fact that basically the false allegations community sort of appeal our cause is very unpopular in the public, and that's what's being responded to by the CCRC's behaviour? Because these things are so unpopular, the public doesn't want to think people are in prison innocently, or all kinds of people getting away with it, that kind of thing. Because of that, the CCRC aren't going to refer anybody, and if they did, it would open the floodgates to many, many other things happening. I'm not talking about myself here. I'm talking about what I read in the people that I write about. Am I correct in this, or is I just very cynical? What do you think?
Well, there's no doubt that if you're talking about the kind of false allegations in terms of sexual abuse cases, which I think is what you're getting at, I think.
For example, yeah.
I mean, the referral rate is low across the board, but it is particularly low in that type of case. And that, in fact, in our recent figures, about 63% of the people writing to us are people who've been convicted of sexual abuse allegations.
63%. 63%
in recent figures of people contacting us, and very, very often historically.
Okay, so the Refuge was created by Erin Pizzey in 1971. None of these organizations existed in 1965. 150,000 of them existed in 1975. They took control of every university in the Anglosphere, every single one. They had women's studies degrees, women's studies departments. They had set up all of these activist groups, women's activist groups, domestic violence groups. They began publishing a vast literature, created hundreds of journals, specialized journals. You can read, they're all around. You can just read them. The Journal of Violence Against Women, the Journal of Women's Subjection to Violence.
An American import by Soterius Solutions, which is an American for-profit company, which for 10 years has been commercializing the Times, the Title IX campus rape situation in America, where the academic boards will prosecute allegations on their campuses for big kind of grants from the Ministry of Justice in America. So they get rich on sexual allegations, basically.
Between 2009 and 2011, when the Dear Colleague letter was introduced, there were things put in place to basically make money off it. And, you know, so the Dear Colleague letter was introduced in New Hampshire on Monday, April 4th, 2011.
What's the Dear what's the Dear Colleague letter? What was
Dear
that?
Colleague letter is an unregulated, meaning it didn't go through the regulatory process where people comment and so forth. It is an unregulated directive that Vice President Joe Biden introduced at the University of New Hampshire, that was given to every college in, and I'm not sure if it was given to schools at that point, but certainly to every college and university in the nation, which is pretty much everywhere. that receives federal funding. And it was a directive to them on how they had to handle sex discrimination, Title IX.
Is it sort of correct to assume then, kind of as the guy in this conversation here, that the kind of instruction that the kids are getting from the authorities is quite complex, whereas the instruction they're getting from their pop stars and their other influences is more kind of messy and human, that sort of thing, and they can't get those things together. Is that right, Jennifer? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the message from my students will listen more, I would say, to Instagram influencers than they would the parent in this sort of situation. I think one of the Kardashians has just released some pictures, I think it was yesterday, of her bottom completely out. Apparently that's empowering.
We're not going to diss anybody who wants to morph the body into something.
If they want to be naked, they can be naked. But my issue with that is we've turned being naked into empowering. And I don't think that everybody necessarily internally feels empowered naked, because the view of what naked's supposed to look like isn't what they look like. So they can get like a false sense of self-esteem by likes on particular body areas. But that's not the same as building your own self-esteem based on something real and tangible. So that sort of imagery for both boys and girls is unrealistic. It's not a real estimation of what they're going to see.
It's there with Andy Markinson too, and from everything I've read on that, he's a very innocent man.
He served 17 years in prison, and I think he could have been released after 6.5 years, but because he maintained I'm innocent, that doesn't allow for early release in any way, does it?
That's right. It's incredibly difficult to maintain innocence in prison. About a fifth of people in prison are. It's not half like they say in Shawshank Redemption or anything, but a fifth do say they are innocent of some degree of the conviction. So that doesn't always mean totally innocent. It just means that the conviction is spurious. There's something wrong with it. And because of what we've seen by CCRC Watch and by Appeal and yourself attempting to expose what's really going on with these things, then you understand that the people maintaining innocence have a very good claim.
It's an amazing day to be in London today, the falsely accused day. Got it slightly early, walking along the Thames, and I'm going to go and try and find them and not get lost because I'm not on my patch. I'm very excited to meet all the fellow falsely accused and their loved ones.
When you say somebody's been raped, they assume it's a dark alleyway, late at night, the woman has been jumped. That is the scenario, that's the narrative that we've been sold. But really, Sean, I think one of the things that you're saying is that what happens in your experience and your understanding is that it's not necessarily that a rape has taken place on every occasion, but some sort of misunderstanding between the people involved. One has taken it one way and one has taken it another.
That's exactly what's happening. But because that story is it's a nuance and it's not very useful for the activists and the headlines.
No,
they put it all into this term, which is, of course, it's one of the most powerful words in English, isn't it? Rape. It is terrifying for everybody, the sane and the mad, But they have made, I'm afraid the activists have made this whole term into a thing to demonize insufficiently risk-averse men. People like me and people who've been in business before. And when you've had a false allegation, of course, it's sort of life-destroying, as Sean knows, and loads of people that I work for now know, and I represent in writing, You know, and I'm not doing it to protect the guilty. It's not about that. It's not about the violent rapists who do exist, but they're a tiny number. They really are a tiny number.
Yeah, we
And
don't
when
want
they
to
put
start
them-
thinking that every man is a rapist, right? We don't want that attitude, and that is definitely prevalent out there. A lot of it is, there's a lot of misandry, and I expect there'll be clips of me just selectively cut, and they'll go, "Oh, she supports rape." And I don't support rape. That would be a ridiculous statement. But I don't support false allegations either, because that gets in the way of the real situations. That how we do know false allegations happen. We know that.
All of these negative stories that are constantly just bombarded with negatives about this person's done this, even way before they've even been put on trial. You know, you're guilty way before then, and it's causing problems, to my mind, of media, of jury swear and bias way before they're even getting to a courtroom and sat down. They're already have got a well-formed opinion of what a paedophile is and what a rapist is, and they're not in any position to be making the judgments that they are, which is my opinion. How do you feel about that yourself, Patrick?
I know that the culture is exactly that. If I studied for a while the BBC and the Guardian, who I consider the two prime industry types, the victim industry supporters, and they would try and put out 2 stories a week on how rape victims are not being heard, or there are more than you thought, or there's all the various stories that reinforce the idea that there are masses of rape victims out there, that every man is an abuser, all this. And it was very noticeable that on the day Carl Beach got sentenced for perverting the course of justice, within 2 hours of that verdict, the Guardian had put up for the 4th time the same.
I don't have a party, and I'm not an MRA person, not a men's rights person. I'm an equal rights person. And under equal rights, you would think that people have the same agency as those people say in their decisions, but that's not being applied by the court. And the result of that is every year to 70,000 rape allegations across the country, and you don't get these people talking in the way that I do. And 68,000 or so of them go nowhere, which by definition makes them spurious, if not false. But if you mention this, you're called victim blaming, all the rest of it, because of the tone of the debate.
William Collins talks at length about the reasons for the attrition in rape cases, you know, from the initial reports to the police to convictions. And it's actually no higher a rate of attrition than is true in abuse cases, in assault cases, more generally. But I mean, to my mind, if a man and a woman are equally drunk, and have sex, the man is no more guilty of abusing the woman than the woman of abusing the man.
One of the things is that over in America, there was a louder, an actress-led Me Too movement, but there's also a louder anti-cancel culture and anti-woke movement, if you like, and those things have been bashing against each other for quite a while. In this country, I think we're still far too subservient to the BBC and Guardian tendency to say, you know, whatever happens, we're failing the rape victims. So, and there are very few people who are falsely accused. I don't think that's going to wash forever, because the numbers are just becoming more and more public.
To give you a sort of more contemporary example of the way the rights of defendants are being taken away, you're probably familiar with the case of Liam Allen, who was a young student accused of rape. And his trial had actually started, and he had a very diligent barrister who sat up all night going through some previously undisclosed text messages and discovered evidence which effectively proved that it was a false accusation, and the trial collapsed. Now, you would have thought that the reaction to that from the public and from the authorities would be that, okay, it's really very important that we do look at the complainant's phone. Exactly the opposite has happened. The message now, the police have been told you should not look at the complainant's phone, except to a very limited degree.
So we did a lot of research showing that societies around the world, there are miscarriage of justice. There are miscarriage of justice in our society, and it's untenable to work on the basis that everybody in prison is factually guilty, even though they are all legally guilty. So Armenia now is part of this global movement where we work together to try to make our societies more just and more safe by convicting the correct people and not convicting the wrong people.
It's a business imported. So the more allegations you get, the more money you get. And then the whole of the victims industry melting into the justice reform industry. This isn't conspiracy theory. These are all very provable facts under various reports. It's just very intricately done, much like a web. And so then you start to realize, well, what's just happened to me? What's just happened to him? Like in prison, 1,400 a year, up to 1,500, between 13 and 1,500 wrongful convictions. But the reason they're wrongful is because of the grey area of the alleged sort of sex offences. You know, you can do anything with it, and that's what the soteria is going to do more. I don't think it's been doing it so far. It's going to get worse. Is the main problem. That's why interviews like this are so important. Okay, I was done under Me Too. People will me under Operation Midland, back to the 2003 thing with Tony Blair and the New Labour's expanding of the sex laws. But now we're having an American commercial company imported to Britain to up the statistics in order for everyone else to make more money. So even if the toxic feminists argument, we want to go, well, they're just feminists, that's just the culture wars, possibly, but there's still a bunch of other people who don't identify as feminists making a bunch of money off it.